2001, a phenomenon developed during the population census in various countries. In Scotland, for example, over 14,000 people stated that Jedi was their current religion. The Jedi are part of a fictitious world. In Australia, more than 70,000 people declared themselves to be members of this Jedi order. 640 Serbians identified as such, over 53,000 people from New Zealand called Jedi their religion, 21,000 Canadians put that down on their census forms. England and Wales, however, had them all beat. In 2001, nearly 400,000 people stated their religion as Jedi. 10 years later in England, the number of Jedi, according to this one article that I read, had fallen from that 400,000 to 176,632, placing it in 7th place, having been overtaken by Judaism and Buddhism, but still comfortably outnumbering any other alternative or mock religion. Jedi is the title used by George Lucas in his Star Wars films for the warriors who use the Force and who wield the lightsabers. In his fantasy world, the Force is a mystical power that unifies every living thing. The wise old mentor figure in those early films, Obi-Wan Kenobi, says this about the Force: it surrounds us, penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together. George Lucas, the author of this Star Wars universe, claimed that in part his goal was to instill in children a belief in a supreme being, not a religious God, but a universal deity that he named the Force, a cosmic energy source that incorporates and consumes all living things. Lucas was aiming to instill both a sense of personal responsibility and ethic, as well as a mystical interconnectedness, without relying on that traditional concept of deity. One analysis boils it down to sort of an Eastern mysticism with a Judeo-Christian ethic. The Force is articulated by Obi-Wan Kenobi as an energy field created by all living things that binds the universe together. Another Jedi teacher in the movie, in the second movie actually, Yoda, guides the hero of the tale, Luke Skywalker, to see how the Force interacts not just with living things, but with all things. For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is, Yoda says. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you, he says, here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, and everywhere. Yes, even between the land and the ship. You remember that scene in the show? I suspect that the census phenomenon was more than just a protest or a playful mockery of government, bureaucracy, and census taking. I suspect that people wrote Jedi on their religious portion of the census, partly out of a hunger for some kind of spirituality and ethic that they saw when they watched those movies. In fact, there is a real community that call themselves the Temple of the Jedi Order, and on their website, the first thing they say is, "We are not a community of Star Wars role players, but a church of a genuine religion, Jediism. Star Wars Jedi are fictional characters," they say, "that exist within a literary and cinematic universe. The Jedi discussed within this website, it goes on, refer to real people within this world that live or lived their lives according to the principles of Jediism, the real Jedi religion. They go on to discuss interconnectedness with all things, the ethics of building a good community founded on peace and personal responsibility. If anything, the real Jedi focus more on the ethics and less on the mysticism. At least that's the part that I saw when I was looking on their website. What caught my interest is the way that George Lucas's movies captured not only those deep archetypes of characters, but also a deep vision of a non-theistic spirituality. People are clearly hungering for this sort of spirituality around the world. Of course, Star Wars is not the only place for this sort of non-traditional theology of spirit and dynamic interconnectedness. Unitarian Universalism has our very own Sage of Concord in the form of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Some of the concepts found in George Lucas's fantasy mysticism from the 1970s, some align with the ideas and concepts of Emerson and the other transcendentalists from the 1830s and 40s. Emerson spoke of an oversoul, an all-pervasive divine spirit that encompasses all souls. Just as every human personality has a soul, an essence, an essential wholeness in which all the parts are unified, all existence has an oversoul that is the wholeness of all that is. Emerson refers to that great nature in which we rest. As the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere, that unity, that oversoul, within which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all others, that common heart. There's no thread of connection between Ralph Waldo Emerson and George Lucas. No suggestion that George Lucas was attempting to talk about the Oversoul. I'm not suggesting a connection beyond similarity of some of the ideas. The Force is an all-pervading energy that binds the universe together. The Oversoul, likewise, is an all-pervading and unifying power in the universe. Emerson insisted that the Oversoul is everywhere and in all things, not merely living things. What is there of the divine in a load of bricks, he wrote in his journal at one point? What is there of the divine in a barber shop? Much. All. Emerson intuited that the world is an outgrowth of the Oversoul. This is actually the opposite of what Obi-Wan Kenobi was saying. Emerson says that the world grows out of the Oversoul, which is there first. Obi-Wan Kenobi said that the Force is an energy field created by all the living things that binds the universe together. For Emerson, the mind of God exists first, and then from that comes the world. Whereas Obi-Wan Kenobi said it the other way around. But for Emerson, we are literally a part of God. In his journals, Emerson said, I exist directly from God. I am, as it were, God's organ. Emerson more readily named it God. That's another difference. That's something that George Lucas only did in a footnote in one of his biographies. But in the Oversoul, Emerson says, I am constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the will I call mine. For Emerson, God was was not a personality, but was definitely an intelligence and a will. He said that we can know God through science, through art and nature, through the lives of the greatest of men and women throughout history, but the truest way to know God directly from within. When we have broken from our God of tradition, when we have ceased from our God of rhetoric, then may God fire the heart with his presence. In some ways, that categorical term that's used for Emerson and others like him, the transcendentalists, is a little misleading. His perspective is a God that is immanent, not transcendent, not wholly other and outside. God, according to Emerson, is found most truly in your own heart. But the transcendentalists don't take their name from their notion of God. They take their name, rather, from their notion of the existence of a moral law, an absolute that has its source as a moral law from God. And how this law is known is by inner searching. But that's the transcendental, the moral law. In his great essay, The Self-Reliance, Emerson admonishes, trust yourself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. So by our intuition, we run straight to the heart of God, and thus to the heart of this moral law that is transcendent. And in the Oversoul, he says it like this. This, because the heart in thee is the heart of all. Not a valve, not a wall, not an intersection is there anywhere in nature. But one blood rolls uninterruptedly in endless circulation through all men. As the waters of the globe are all one sea, and truly seen their tide is one. Let man then learn the revelation of all nature and all thought to his heart, this namely, that the highest dwells with him. This idea, the implications of such a connection is not only do we find no wall between us and the divine, but in the same way, we can know beauty. We can know truth and justice. We lie in the lap of immense intelligence, which makes us receivers of its truth and organs of its activity. He writes this in Self-Reliance. When we discern justice, when we discern truth, we do nothing of ourselves but allow a passage to its beams. Thus, according to Emerson, there is a divine moral law inscribed in the heart and conscience of every person. You recognize truth when you see it because you lie in the lap of the source of truth, if you will but quiet the outer noise and open your mind. We do not invent the principles and the values that are most important. They come from God. But we must go to God directly, according to Emerson, to truly know those laws. I get a little carried away whenever I talk about Emerson. Let me shift topics a little to point out that the two essential aspects of the Force from Star Wars, its mystical omnipresence and its moral code of personal responsibility and personal integrity, are, as I have tried to lift up, found in these central tenets of Ralph Waldo Emerson's Transcendentalism. He named the Oversoul the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related. So these connections between the Force and the Oversoul talk about the omnipresence of this energy, this omnipresence of divinity, as well as this moral code to be in the world in a particular way. The force, the Oversoul, and I'll add a third one now to speak of qi. In traditional Chinese culture, qi, or qi, is an active principle in any living thing. In the Tai Chi classics, qi is defined as intrinsic energy. But qi is often translated in a couple of different ways, like natural energy, or life force, or even energy flow, the literal translation. Qi literally means breath, air. Everyone is born with qi. There is no way to lose your qi except through death, at which time your qi disperses back to the universe. Qi is ultimately found in all living things. It is the ultimate and eternal power that moves the universe. Qi arises from the dynamic balancing of yin and yang. So we're now dipping a little further into, Chinese philosophy here. It is the ceaseless movement in balance between positive and negative, constructive and destructive forces in the universe. Everything derives its existence from the dynamic conflict between yin and yang. Thus, it's not only living things, but also non-living things. Even, they say, unfilled space is part of this dynamic interplay of yin and yang. Taoism, the Tao is interpreted as the way. It's also interpreted as a person traveling the way. It's this dynamic energy of qi in there. So in chapter 42 of the Tao Te Ching, I just want to read you a small portion of it. It says, Tao gives birth to the one gives birth to the two gives birth to the three, and the three give birth to the 10,000 things. This is a euphemism, a metaphor for everything. And everything carries on its back yin and holds yang. It creates harmony in the middle energy. So, just to connect this back to a story we were talking about last week, creation stories. One of the stories we talked about was from China, Pangu and the cosmic egg. First there was this unity, the egg in that story, the Tao, the one. And that led to a duality, the two halves of the egg. The heavy and the light, the earth and the sky. It was a creation story, right? The yin and the yang. And then in this 42nd chapter of the Tao Te Ching, a third thing arises. And from that, there's these 10,000 things. So, noting what I had said earlier, that third thing is qi. It's that intrinsic energy or life force that arises out of that dynamic conflict of balance between yin and yang. It creates harmony in the middle way. And so this middle way is a way of saying qi. Okay, so all of that is very esoteric. But the implications are not that far-fetched. As with the Force and the Oversoul, qi is omnipresent. It's not a deity with a personality. This is also one that doesn't have exactly a will. Instead, it's an energy that pervades everything and moves through us, and we can tap into it for flow. For example, one teaching is in the meditative arts of the Tao is the integration of sky and human. So in other words, if you remain yourself only, you're cutting off the whole universe. But if you can give up your ego, if you can truly be part of the universe, at least erase that boundary line between self and the universe, the integration of sky and human, we can become more at one. When you, for example, place a cup of water into a lake, the water in the cup will become lake water only if the cup submerges. But truly, it's all water anyway, so why not just pour it in and forget the cup? you are seeking a spirituality and an understanding of the holy, of divinity, that is not caught up in these classic Western formulas of a deity with a personality, some anthropomorphic structure. God need not be a being. Perhaps you were intrigued by the ideas presented in Star Wars of the Force when you first saw those movies. It may be that you're looking again at the thought and theology of Ralph Waldo Emerson with a curious eye, or perhaps your spirit has an Eastern bent, and each of these three offers a slightly different perspective. None of them are connected to each other as far as I could tell. They're not talking about the same concepts. And one is not derived from the other, but they all speak of a non-traditional form of spirituality. Now, I will concede that it's perhaps linked, the three concepts. They may go back to an earlier Hindu concept of prana, as articulated in the Vedas. Prana is a Sanskrit word for life force. Emerson was certainly reading the Vedas when he developed his ideas of the Oversoul. That's been acknowledged and studied. And the influence of Hinduism from India and China is also well documented, and most of the Chinese religious traditions share in the root concepts of Hinduism. And I thought at one point I might have seen a bit about George Lucas citing Eastern spirituality or even Hinduism, Hindu mysticism, as a source for his concepts, but I never did track that link, and I never could find any such statement. So I have to say that there probably never was one. But really my point is not about the history or the lineage of these ideas. My point is that your spirit need not be shackled to only one version of deity. There are far more options than you perhaps thought there would be of divinity, beyond traditional theism. What concepts resonate with you? What concepts call out to you or ring true from your experiences? We lie in the lap of an immense dynamic energy that flows through all things, calling us to abide by a higher moral law. Tell me more about how the energy of life flows through all things, and even through you.